What truly shapes a person in the crucible of war? Is it ideology, survival, the relentless pressure of the battlefield, or, something far more complex? Today, we're embarking on a deeply detailed exploration, a true deep dive into the Wehrmacht soldier, life, mindset, and legacy in Nazi Germany. We're not simply recounting historical facts. Our mission is to peel back the layers and try to understand the intricate human elements caught within a profoundly dark period, extracting key insights that might genuinely surprise you. Now, this is, of course, a highly sensitive topic, given the horrific context of Nazi Germany. We want to underscore our unwavering commitment to impartiality and factual reporting, sticking strictly to the robust source material we've gathered. Our goal is to understand what happened, how it happened, and its lasting implications, never ever to condone any of the actions or ideologies discussed.
And that commitment to deep understanding is precisely why this collection of diverse sources is so invaluable. We're drawing from comprehensive historical analyses, the stark realities found in personal memoirs, and even the chilling candidness of secretly recorded conversations of prisoners of war.
Wow, secretly recorded conversations. That's quite a source.
It is, and these very perspectives allow us to move beyond simplistic narratives, to truly grasp the nuanced, often contradictory reality of these individuals and the vast institution they served. Our aim is to provide you, our listener, with a deeply informed and comprehensive understanding, spanning everything from the mundane realities of daily life to the profound psychological impact of combat and the enduring, troubling legacy of the Wehrmacht.
Okay, let's begin by setting the stage, and perhaps by dismantling a long-held misconception right off the bat. When we talk about the Wehrmacht, it's crucial to understand it wasn't just another military. Established in 1935, following Hitler's consolidation of power, it became Nazi Germany's unified armed forces. But right from its inception, its very DNA was coded with Nazi ambition. Its purpose wasn't merely national defense. It was explicitly designed to embody aggressive aspirations for territorial expansion and regional dominance.
Right. That meant the immediate reinstatement of conscription.
Which flew right in the face of the Treaty of Versailles.
Exactly. And a massive, unprecedented investment in creating a modern, offensively capable military machine. This wasn't about building a defensive shield.
No, it was conceived as an elite cadre, wasn't it? Built and trained for extensive, brutal campaigns across Europe. Really the sharp tip of Hitler's spear.
And if we connect this to the broader historical picture, the formation of the Wehrmacht wasn't just about rebuilding Germany's post-World War I military strength. Not at all. It was an active, intentional preparation for aggression, fundamentally and inextricably linked to the regime's genocidal goals and its vision of Lebensraum, living space, in the East.
So from day one, its very existence was tangled up with the darkest aspects of Nazi ideology.
Absolutely. Understanding this fundamental link between the military and the regime's criminal agenda is absolutely critical as we delve deeper into this.
Okay, so for decades after World War II, a pervasive narrative took root, this idea of the clean Wehrmacht. This was a historically inaccurate story, really, that portrayed the German military as somehow apolitical, professional, separate from the ideological excesses and horrific genocidal policies of the Nazi Party.
Right. The myth suggested that any atrocities committed were primarily the domain of the SS or the Gestapo or other specific Nazi organizations.
Effectively absolving the regular armed forces of direct complicity.
Yes, a very convenient fiction. And you saw it everywhere in media, popular culture, even some historical accounts for a long time. However, our sources make it unequivocally clear that this narrative is fundamentally flawed.
So how is it debunked?
What's truly illuminating here is how extensive and rigorous historical research, painstakingly compiled over decades, has thoroughly, completely debunked this myth. It's not just a minor adjustment to history, it's a fundamental reevaluation. It reveals undeniable involvement and pervasive complicity in systematic war crimes and the Holocaust.
And this wasn't just at the top.
No. This culpability extended from the highest command levels, where orders for atrocities were literally issued right down to the ordinary rank and file who executed them, or were complicit through their actions and inaction. This reevaluation is rooted in an overwhelming body of evidence, official documents, eyewitness testimonies, forensic analyses showing their active participation and facilitation in these horrors.
So why does this matter so much to you, the listener, today? Why harp on this point? Because understanding this debunking isn't just about correcting the historical record, though that's important. It establishes the essential ethical and analytical framework for our entire deep dive. It means we cannot solely focus on conventional combat operations when examining the Wehrmacht soldier. Their lives and duties necessarily included participation or complicity in criminal enterprises on an absolutely unprecedented scale.
Exactly. We're looking at a military that wasn't just fighting a war in the traditional sense. It was actively engaged through direct action and systemic support in state-sponsored atrocity.
Which really leads to that crucial, deeply uncomfortable question.
How does a professional military, initially conceived as an elite fighting force, become so profoundly entangled in state-sponsored atrocity and genocide? It underscores the vital importance of continuous critical historical inquiry and, frankly, the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about the past, regardless of how challenging or disturbing they may be.
It's not just about understanding one historical army, is it?
Not at all. It's about recognizing the pathways, the mechanisms through which any military, or any institution for that matter, can be co-opted for horrific purposes.
So, who exactly were the individuals who made up this force? Let's talk numbers first. We're talking about a colossal fighting machine. Between 1933 and 1945, approximately 12 to 13.5 million Germans served in the Wehrmacht.
13.5 million, just think about that number.
It's staggering. That's a significant portion of the entire male German population at the time. Definitely not just some fringe element. This immense force comprised both volunteers, especially early on, maybe swept up in the nationalist fervor.
And conscripts pulling from an incredibly broad cross-section of society.
Right, and it's absolutely crucial to recognize, as you said earlier, individuals did not enter the military with uniform attitudes or the same level of ideological commitment to Nazism. Their motivations, their beliefs were far more varied and complex than we might assume.
Definitely. And while our sources don't give us, a perfect demographic breakdown of every single recruit, we know the Nazi regime systematically targeted German youth for intense ideological indoctrination.
Through organizations like the Hitler Youth?
Precisely. This wasn't a passive approach at all. It was a deliberate, top-down effort to integrate essentially all boys into the Nazi national community and prepare them for military service well before they even reached military age. You mentioned the cradle-to-combat pipeline earlier, and that's exactly what it was designed to be.
The sheer scale of this mobilization is truly mind-boggling. It really highlights the deliberate, pervasive effort from the very top, starting with children, to integrate everyone into this Nazi national community.
It wasn't just about recruiting soldiers. It was about cultivating a specific type of citizen from childhood, steeped in the regime's ideology, to serve its aggressive ambitions. The recruitment process itself was very systematic. Men reaching the age of 20 were called up for a mandatory physical examination, the Musterung.
Where they were basically assessed for fitness.
Yes, classified based on their fitness for service. Initially, the physical requirements were fairly stringent. A minimum height, around 1.55 to 1.60 meters, aiming for taller men, 1.65 to 1.7 meters, especially for infantry roles.
And things like weight, eyesight.
Yep, needed to maintain a healthy weight, possess good eyesight, at least 50% vision in one eye was the minimum, and adequate hearing. Interestingly, and maybe a bit surprising, spectacle wearers weren't entirely excluded. They could still serve, usually in non-combat support roles.
But then the war changed things, didn't it? That ideal physical standard started to crumble.
It absolutely did. As the conflict dragged on and the demand for soldiers escalated dramatically, particularly after huge losses, these once strict physical requirements were increasingly relaxed. That initial preference for taller and stronger men for elite units just got superseded by an overwhelming, desperate need for sheer manpower.
And that shift, that relaxation of standards, it tells a powerful story, doesn't it? About the immense human cost and the regime's growing desperation.
It really does. It paints a grim picture of attrition. Now, for officer candidates, especially those aiming for the Navy, the selection was incredibly rigorous, highly psychologically oriented.
Becca, so?
It was a comprehensive 3-day program. Not just physical and written tests, but extensive oral exams designed to assess character, personality, leadership qualities, tenacity, courage.
Trying to find the right stuff, Nazi style.
You could say that. They even used an experimental courage test, involved holding an electrically charged bar to study candidates' reactions under stress.
Wow. That gives you a chilling glimpse into how deep they were trying to go with psychological assessment, trying to craft this ideal officer.
And that makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it mean for a military's self-perception, its identity, when its own tough standards of the physical ideal get eroded by attrition and desperation?
Yeah, it highlights the hypocrisy, the stark realities of total war.
And furthermore, That psychological testing for officers reveals an almost obsessive focus on crafting specific mental and emotional attributes for leadership. It goes way beyond just physical prowess. It points to this profound attempt at engineering specific character traits within the officer corps, showing the regime's relentless pursuit of ideological and martial perfection, even as reality forced compromises.
So let's talk training. You have this paradox, incredibly refined at the operational level. You mentioned Auftragstactic. Tactic.
Right, mission-oriented command, highly effective tactically.
Fostering troop leading, enhancing unit effectiveness, allowing for flexible decisions in combat. They practice this too, right? Large-scale maneuvers.
Yes. Regular, large-scale, incredibly realistic maneuvers definitely contributed to their preparedness for massive warfare. They knew how to fight a battle, no question.
But then, the other side of the coin, deeply flawed at the strategic and logistical levels.
Precisely. That's the striking disconnect. Brilliant at the micro level of combat, mastering tactical execution, but the bigger picture of sustaining a prolonged, resource-intensive conflict, severely neglected.
How did that show up in training?
Well, the system suffered from profound neglect in crucial areas like logistics, intelligence gathering, the broader strategic and political dimensions. For instance, War Academy curricula spent way too much time on tactics, dedicating far less to vital logistical issues, and that proved devastating later on, especially with supply lines and troop endurance.
So this imbalance between tactical skill and strategic oversight would become a major vulnerability.
A devastating one, especially as the war dragged on across multiple fronts. And think about this. At the start of the war, junior officers often lacked adequate practical experience. And shockingly, only about a quarter of the German army, mainly the motorized and armored divisions, was truly combat ready with enough equipment and proper training.
Only a quarter. What about the rest?
The vast majority of regular infantry divisions still relied heavily on foot marches and horses for transport, barely more mobile than infantry from, say, 70 years prior.
Incredible. Despite those issues, training was constant, pervasive.
Oh yes. It was a grueling, continuous process. Individuals generally got used to the work, as the sources put it. That constant grind, maybe more than ideology for many, defined their daily existence.
Okay, so what was daily life actually like for a Wehrmacht soldier? It sounds like a relentless cycle, mostly defined by duty and that continuous, rigorous training you mentioned. Minimal time for recreation.
Very little. Imagine the scene. Basic field provisions would be personal first aid bandages, small essentials carried constantly. More extensive medical supplies were back at aid stations, often just makeshift setups under intense pressure.
And communication, how did they stay connected?
Communicating with families, which was a vital lifeline to normalcy, was maintained through a regular mail service. Remarkably, it often delivered news from home daily, providing a crucial psychological link. Essential supplies like ammunition and food were transported by truck, but that became an increasingly perilous logistical challenge as the war progressed and supply lines stretched or were attacked.
You mentioned food. Were the rations any good?
Well, in principle, German military rations were scientifically designed for high calorie and protein content. A typical daily allowance included the iron ration, a compact package with canned meat and hard bread for emergencies.
Something you could carry easily.
Exactly. Other staples were condensed pea soup, Erbswurst, a kind of nutrient-dense sausage, and various canned goods like tomato soup, condensed milk, sweet treats, things like fruit candy, rock candy, those lemon-flavored Zitronentraufen were highly valued, not just for morale, but sometimes even seen as having medicinal purposes, especially for frontline troops under immense strain.
And the regime made a deliberate effort to keep rations high.
Yes, very deliberate. It was influenced by the belief that poor home morale and inadequate food supplies had significantly undermined the German war effort in World War I, a calculated policy to avoid repeating history.
So on paper, it sounds almost clinical, efficient, designed for peak performance.
It does sound that way.
But the reality on the ground, as you alluded to, was a stark contrast depending on where you were fighting, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Which brings us right back to that crucial question. How did these official policies and scientifically designed provisions actually hold up against the sheer brutality of the environment and the logistical nightmares?
Especially on the Eastern Front.
Precisely. The gap between policy and reality there was profound, often deadly. The combat experiences were incredibly diverse depending on the time and place. North Africa meant extreme heat, constant thirst, severe supply issues in the desert. The Balkans involved brutal, often hidden partisan fighting, leading to widespread atrocities, a breakdown of norms.
And the West, early successes.
Yes. Early on, the rapid blitzkrieg tactics gave a false sense of easy victory. But the Eastern Front, that was truly hellish. A war of annihilation, not just territory.
Characterized by
Unimaginable extreme cold, vast distances that just swallowed supply lines, and ferocious, often genocidal engagements. And don't forget the Russian Rasputitsa, the mud season, making roads impassable, turning movement into an exhausting slog, worsening supply issues.
And the brutality wasn't just soldier versus soldier.
No, far from it. Crucially, the German military was explicitly encouraged to act with maximum brutality towards Soviet civilians. This meant widespread food confiscation, directly contributing to the starvation of millions.
Forced labor, too.
Yes, forced labor in abhorrent conditions. Both sides frequently disregarded international law, engaged in institutionalized cruelty against enemy troops, prisoners, civilians. The Wehrmacht committed systematic war crimes, massacres, widespread mass rape, looting, the murder of millions of Soviet POWs through starvation, exposure, or direct execution.
You mentioned mass rape being widespread.
Sickeningly prevalent on the Eastern Front, often involving entire military units. And while officially forbidden, it was largely tolerated in practice across Eastern and Southeastern Europe. And what's chillingly insightful here comes from those secretly recorded POW conversations. Men spoke casually, even gleefully, about raping and killing civilians and prisoners.
Casually, gleefully.
That's what the sources report. It wasn't just a few bad apples. It suggests a profound desensitization where extreme violence, including sexual violence, became perceived as normal, even a necessity, within their immediate combat environment.
So the environment itself, it became this powerful, corrosive force, reshaping their actions, their perceptions, overriding maybe any pre-existing morals they had.
That seems to be the implication. It wasn't just following orders. It points towards a tragic transformation of individual morality, driven by the immediate social context and relentless dehumanizing propaganda.
It highlights that disturbing phenomenon of how ordinary people can become perpetrators when the social environment and propaganda normalize the unthinkable.
Precisely. It underscores the profound moral degradation that can occur in total war, where the boundaries of acceptable human behavior are just systematically eroded.
Yet, amidst all this horror, soldiers still found ways to cope. You mentioned friendship and duty.
Yes, those were key. The relationship between rank-and-file NCOs and officers was often described as friendly leadership and obedience. Less rigidly hierarchical, perhaps. This, combined with shared extreme hardship, fostered incredibly strong bonds, deep, intense connections forged in life-or-death situations.
And those POW recordings again, what did they reveal about soldiers' focus?
They revealed that, for many, soldiers largely focused on doing their work and seeking acceptance amongst their comrades. Their worldviews were primarily shaped by their immediate core group, their unit, their duty, the next battle, their weapons.
Less so by abstract political ideals.
Often, yes. Less about the grand new order Nazi leaders pushed. This points to the role of pragmatism. For many, the practical needs of survival and belonging within their unit often superseded deep ideological purity.
Survival and belonging took precedence.
It seems so. While indoctrination played a role, the immediate, tangible needs of combat and social cohesion were often paramount. Some memoirs also mention humor, dark humor, as a coping mechanism, a necessary release.
So it paints this picture of intense human connection, almost primal bonding, forged in extreme adversity. A very human response, searching for solidarity within a deeply inhuman situation. Let's delve deeper now into how the Wehrmacht soldiers' mindset was molded, often long before they even saw a battlefield. Nazi propaganda. It wasn't crude, was it?
Not at all. It was an incredibly effective and disturbingly sophisticated instrument, employing what were, for the time, advanced advertising techniques and cutting-edge technology. This strategic communication played a truly crucial role, not just garnering public support for the party, but later, systematically facilitating persecution, war, and ultimately, genocide.
What was its core function, according to its architects?
Never objective truth. Instead, it was explicitly defined as to serve our own right, always and unflinchingly. This meant systematically demonizing perceived enemies, Jews, communists primarily, but also capitalists, intellectuals, anyone deemed an opponent.
And promoting core Nazi values.
Absolutely. Things like heroic death, the Führer principle, that absolute leader principle, Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community, Blut und Bold, blood and soil, asserting racial purity and territory, and a fervent pride in the Germanic Herrenvolk, the master race.
And this created an atmosphere.
an atmosphere tolerant, even encouraging, of violence against Jews, often paving the way for discriminatory legislation and later atrocities.
What's truly chillingly insightful here is how they didn't just spread information. They meticulously engineered a kind of collective delusion.
Exactly. They didn't just tell people who to hate. They methodically dismantled the cognitive and emotional barriers to violence by making targets seem less than human or an existential threat. It reveals how mass media, even then, could be weaponized to reshape a society's moral landscape.
Making the unthinkable seem necessary.
Precisely. After invading the Soviet Union, for instance, propaganda intensified, explicitly linking Soviet communism to European Jewry. A deliberate effort to portray Germany as the heroic defender against the Judeo-Bolshevik threat, giving the brutal Eastern Front a supposed ideological justification.
And key ideological sources were widely spread.
Oh, yes. Hitler's Mein Kampf, detailing his violent anti-Semitism and disdain for democracy, and other books like Rassenkunde des Deutschen Volks, promoting racial hierarchies, were even used as educational texts in schools, embedding these twisted ideas from childhood.
So someone joining the Wehrmacht wasn't just joining an army. They were swimming in this ocean of calculated messaging from birth, essentially, their worldview engineered.
That's a good way to put it. This truly is that cradle-to-combat pipeline we mentioned. Not accidental, meticulously engineered.
And the Hitler Youth was central to that.
Absolutely central. From the 1920s, the party strategically targeted youth as an impressionable audience. They presented themselves as dynamic, resilient, hopeful, appealing to a generation disillusioned by Weimar. The Hitler Youth, HJ, for boys, and the League of German Girls, BDM, were the primary instruments for indoctrination, preparing them physically and mentally for future warfare.
And membership exploded.
Dramatically. From about 100,000 in early 1933 to a staggering 7.2 million, that's 82% of youth aged 10-18 by 1940.
Wow. Fueled by enthusiasm, peer pressure,
And outright coercion for resistors. Jewish youth, crucially, were excluded and persecuted. These groups enforced strict conformity uniforms, Nazi songs, regular meetings that dominated lives, interfering with school, church,
and the training aimed
to cultivate race-conscious, obedient, self-sacrificing Germans, willing to die for Führer and fatherland. Unwavering devotion to Hitler was key. At 18, boys were mandated to enlist in the armed forces or Reich labor service. Hitler himself said in 1938 the Wehrmacht would take care of any remaining class consciousness or social status after the youth indoctrination.
finishing the job, essentially. And central to all this psychological shaping was radicalization, not just becoming extreme, but...
It's understood as developing extremist beliefs, emotions, behaviors opposing broader societal values, advocating group supremacy, functionally, an enhanced preparation for intergroup conflict.
And a critical mechanism was dehumanization.
Yes, systematically employed. Identifying targets, like Jews, with animal life forms, parasites. This had profound psychological consequences, facilitating violence by disengaging moral concern. The Nazi case provides incredibly strong evidence for dehumanization as a calculated psychological strategy, not just spontaneous hatred.
Creating an echo chamber.
Exactly. A bubble reinforcing beliefs, leading to emotion-driven actions. Linguistic analysis of their propaganda found they denied experience to victims, but increased terms of agency for Jews, portraying them as cunning, malevolent, justifying destruction as self-defense.
So it wasn't just about hating, it was systematically changing perception to remove barriers to violence, making it seem necessary.
Precisely. An engineered component of their psychological warfare, effectively overriding moral inhibitions, enabling ordinary people to commit atrocities by altering their perception of the victim's humanity.
Okay, let's confront this head on. That myth of the clean Wehrmacht is demonstrably false. Our sources are unequivocal. The German military was extensively involved in the Holocaust and other Nazi genocidal policies.
Complicity ran deep, from the highest ranks right down to the rank and file. The army, the Heer, was particularly complicit, especially on the Eastern Front, that ideological war against Judeo-Bolshevism.
And a key piece of evidence is the criminal orders.
Absolutely. Issued by the German High Command before Operation Barbarossa. Pre-planned directives explicitly rejecting laws of war, actively encouraging atrocities. They include the jurisdiction order, stating German soldiers wouldn't be prosecuted for crimes against Soviet civilians. Think about that.
Carte blanche, effectively.
Pretty much. Then the guidelines for the behavior of the troops, instructing ruthless and aggressive action against Bolshevik agitators, snipers, saboteurs, and Jews, immediately targeting Jewish populations.
And the Commissar order.
Mandating the immediate execution of captured Soviet political commissars. This fundamentally changes how we view the Wehrmacht. These weren't isolated incidents. They were direct, institutionalized consequences of high-level policy.
Turning the military into an instrument of genocide. Not just war, but a war of annihilation, designed from the top.
Which leads to that crucial question. How does an entire military apparatus become an instrument of genocide through deliberate legal and moral abrogation? It challenges any notion of soldiers acting solely out of spontaneous brutality.
And they collaborated with the Einsatzgruppen.
Knowingly. Providing logistical support, intelligence, often direct manpower for mass executions. Furthermore, Wehrmacht soldiers frequently engaged directly in massacres of Jews, not just assisting the SS. In places like Serbia, for example, the majority of Jews murdered were killed by the Wehrmacht itself.
And the sexual violence. Mass rape.
Widespread on the Eastern Front, often involving entire units. Officially prohibited, but largely tolerated in practice. A deep moral collapse.
So given this pervasive environment of systematic violence, how much did the average soldier actually know about the final solution, the extermination plan?
That's a complex question. The precise number, with full explicit knowledge of gas chambers and the industrial scale, is unknown. But the broader German population was acutely aware of Nazi antisemitism and violent rhetoric.
So they knew something was happening.
Many historians argue Germans received explicit enough information to indicate ongoing massacres. Mass killings of Soviet POWs within Germany were known early on. Nazi policies were widely disseminated. Berlin radio broadcast news of mass executions. Hitler alluded to the destruction of Jews in public speeches in 1942.
Did location matter?
Areas closer to Poland and Russia likely had more direct anecdotal knowledge. There's a strong likelihood Germans understood the fatal implications of deportation, given knowledge of mass shootings in the Soviet Union, the destination for many deportees.
And those POW recordings again.
Revealed, many spoke casually, even gleefully, about raping and killing civilians and prisoners, though often their main concerns were unit, duty, battle, not ideology.
What about specific knowledge of gas chambers?
Less universal, but discussed by 1943 due to foreign broadcasts, rumors filtering through. Prompt authorities used propaganda, forced postcards to conceal the full truth.
So it wasn't a simple knew versus didn't know.
Not at all. What's compelling is the spectrum of knowledge. The regime created layers of information, but enough permeated that willful ignorance became a crucial psychological strategy for many. You could choose how much attention you paid.
So while maybe not everyone knew every horrific detail, the picture isn't one of total ignorance. There was a pervasive understanding of a horrific trajectory and a choice for many to look away.
Exactly. And a prevalent coping mechanism among perpetrators and the broader population was creating distance between those acts and themselves, relying on the chain of command, bureaucratic processes that abstracted the violence, or simply physical separation from killing sites. Many high-ranking Nazis intentionally avoided visiting extermination camps. Clear, willful ignorance.
Like deliberate non-engagement.
Yes, extending to the general population. This raises a crucial question about managing cognitive dissonance on a mass scale. Willful ignorance functions as a profound form of complicity. It enables atrocities by providing a psychological buffer.
Allowing people to feel less directly responsible, even while part of the system. A chilling reminder of how easy it can be to disconnect, rationalize inaction, participate through omission, calculated turning away. Let's shift now to another deeply disturbing aspect of Nazi ideology and its impact, the systematic persecution of homosexual men, including within the Wehrmacht. From 1933 to 45, the regime systematically and ruthlessly targeted homosexuals, particularly men, as enemies of the state. Why?
They were deemed fundamentally incompatible with Nazi ideals of racial and social purity. They didn't contribute to the growth of the Aryan population, and crucially, were seen as a direct threat to proper family life and traditional gender roles.
How did the Nazis view sex?
Primarily through the utilitarian lens of reproduction, producing racially pure offspring, not pleasure or individual fulfillment. High-ranking officials like Himmler feared homosexual companionship could foster loyalties superseding the party state.
Viewing them as propagation blanks.
Exactly. Untrusted to fulfill their duty. So it wasn't just about morality, it was a hyper-utilitarian, dehumanizing view where everyone served the state's twisted eugenic and expansionist goals. No room for divergence.
What's insightful here is that intersection of racial ideology with total control over individual identity. Any relationship not serving the Volksgemeinschaft was a direct threat.
A diversion of loyalty and resources from the state's demands.
And this wasn't just social disapproval, it was state-sponsored eradication. Homosexuality was illegal before, under paragraph 175.
but generally tolerated in the 1920s, especially in cities like Berlin. Hitler immediately banned homosexual groups in 1933. Paragraph 175 was enforced with unprecedented zeal and revised in 1935 potential decade in prison, far more severe.
And specialized police units.
A dedicated Gestapo division in 1934. Himmler created a Reich Central Office for combating homosexuality and abortion in 1936, explicitly linking them as threats to the Aryan birth rate. Official army directives highlighted the danger of homosexual activity among men in close proximity without heterosexual outlets. Harsh measures adopted.
Hitler himself ordered purges.
In 1941, ordered a purge in the SS, death sentence for lewdness. After 1942, judges and SS officials could order castration of imprisoned homosexuals without consent, a horrifying violation. The methods were horrifyingly systematic.
Yet, despite this brutal official policy, the reality on the ground, even in the Wehrmacht, was more complex.
Remarkably so. Enforcement was by no means consistent or clear. Here's the profound internal contradiction. Rigid ideology versus human reality. While policy persecuted brutally, the very hyper-masculine, comradeship-focused military environment paradoxically fostered intense male bonding that could, and did, lead to homoerotic behavior.
The emphasis on virility, strength, comradeship inadvertently created an environment
That could arouse homoerotic tendencies.
Yeah.
It even attracted some gay men initially, believing they'd find acceptance in that hyper-masculine world. Within the military, non-sexual snuggling was considered unexceptional, even in the strict SS. Many soldiers didn't view more intimate acts like groping or fondling as especially reprehensible, often seeing it as a release.
Wartime realities, isolation from women.
Led some to vent their pent-up sexual energies on each other. Navy accounts suggest significant queer relationships, like between wingers and oppos, mentoring pairs that became intimate. Gay men had to conceal from senior officers, censors, medical boards, but often found openness among shipmates, creating hidden support networks.
What about punishment?
Could be severe, but commanders often preferred less serious charges or discreet resignations to avoid public scandals damaging the service's reputation. Some queer men felt a heightened need to prove bravery, much braver than straight men, to compensate and gain acceptance.
But the persecution numbers are still horrifying.
Staggering. Around 100,000 German-Austrian men arrested. 5,000, 15,000 imprisoned in concentration camps. Around 10,000 perished there.
This inherent limitation, the hypocrisy of totalitarian ideologies, is starkly exposed when they clash with complex human nature.
Absolutely. Even a regime built on absolute social engineering can't fully suppress behaviors emerging from social and environmental conditions.
So, official policy: eradicate homosexuality, arrest, torture, death. But Wehrmacht reality: hypermasculine bonding, wartime isolation led to homosexual acts, sometimes overlooked and managed discreetly by peers.
A powerful illustration of how messy human life can defy rigid ideology, creating contradictions even within a monolithic system of control. Diving into the soldiers' mindset, their worldviews, especially rank and file, were largely shaped by the core group to which they belonged. Their unit, their immediate duty, the next battle, and their weapons of war. That's a crucial insight.
So practical, immediate concerns often overshadowed grand ideology.
It seems so. While many were influenced by National Socialism, the sources suggest a significant number weren't deeply invested in the new order. They focused on doing their work and seeking acceptance amongst their comrades. This implies adherence to Nazi ideology was often secondary to primal needs of survival and group cohesion, especially under brutal combat conditions. Pragmatism over ideological purity.
So, while indoctrination played a role, day-to-day realities shifted priorities.
Yes. The immediate threat, relying on comrades, often prioritized these pragmatic concerns. It helps explain how soldiers could be complicit in atrocities, but their primary driver might not always have been fanatical belief, or a complex interplay of duty, peer pressure, survival instinct, and the psychological impact of a brutal, dehumanizing environment.
That's a vital distinction, reconciling pervasive indoctrination with the pragmatism of survival. Not monolithic, but a complex tapestry of motivations. You see examples like Corporal Hans Roth, whose diaries show him as a typical victim of Hitler's propaganda, readily adopting dehumanizing language.
Right. Then others, like General Gotthard Heinrici, reserved, not fanatical, privately critical, yet fought to the end, driven by professional duty, military loyalty.
Constant threat and hardship fostered focus on immediate survival.
Primarily, pushing grand ideology back. Yet for some, an idealist perspective belief in a shared purpose to reach the stars, Cole's Society of Degeneracy also contributed, providing a warped moral compass.
So it tells us that even within a brutal regime, Motivations are rarely simple. For the average soldier, belonging and surviving often took precedence.
And speaking of survival, the psychological toll was immense. Coping mechanisms included friendship and duty. Training was constant, brutal. Soldiers got used to the work through exposure. But despite that post-war myth of German soldiers' immunity to stress, their unfailing nerves,
That wasn't true.
not at all. Combat stress reactions, CSR, now acute stress reactions, were common, often leading to inability to fight. Early analyses tragically underestimated this, but later reports acknowledged high CSR casualties, directly challenging that myth. What's truly illuminating is how the sources reveal this hidden epidemic of combat stress, shattering the image of the flawless war machine.
Revealing a critical human cost often deliberately downplayed. Understanding the psychological toll, even on perpetrators, helps see them as human while still holding them fully accountable.
Exactly. Prolonged engagement of survival mechanisms led to physical symptoms: trembling, dizziness, hyperventilation, debilitating soldiers. Breakdown was often cumulative stress from numerous traumas.
What were their deepest fears?
Profound fears: death, permanent crippling, capture torture, ultimate defeat, and perhaps most acutely, showing cowardice or succumbing to madness before comrades. The scale is underscored by comparison. Over 500,000 U.S. servicemen were separated for psychiatric behavioral reasons in WWII,
And this brings us back to dehumanization facilitating violence.
a critical psychological prerequisite, portraying Jews as subhuman, parasites, bacillus, effectively disengaging moral concern, making violence easier. Not spontaneous, but ideologically driven, systematically propagated. Portraying Jews as insidious and cunning agents of malevolence solidified the perceived threat.
It explains how that psychological state was cultivated, overriding moral inhibitions, enabling ordinary people to commit atrocities by altering their perception of victims' humanity. As the war turned against Germany, that initial fervor began to erode, didn't it? What was the emotional landscape like?
Devastating. Even before the end, SS Security Service reports noted widespread popular feelings of mourning, despondency, bitterness, and a rising fury. A sense of deepest disappointment for having misplaced one's trust in the regime.
And for soldiers on the front.
Brutal combat, especially on the Eastern Front, led to profound disillusionment, shattering earlier patriotic visions. After Stalingrad in early '43, a clear turning point, most German officers privately knew the war was lost.
Yet millions fought on.
Yes, despite hopeless odds. Some clung desperately to hope in wonder weapons or Hitler's supposed cunning. But first-hand accounts from Stalingrad describe utter psychological collapse. Germany was now a fantasy, and death was a mercy.
What's compelling is that progression. Initial faith to deep disillusionment, yet the fighting continued. Why?
Complex factors. Immediate unit cohesion, fear of reprisal for desertion, maybe simply the lack of a viable alternative or path to surrender. The Nazi values and ideology were completely upended by defeat, leaving profound disorientation, an unbearable present, an uncertain future.
A psychological void.
Exactly. A moral, social, epistemological void, their whole worldview collapsed. Often filled by irrational beliefs, rumors, bizarre prophecies, the earth shifting, a biblical flood, desperate attempts to make sense of the unimaginable. Many Germans struggled immensely to process their previous identification with the collapsed regime. Some scholars call it an inability to mourn, unable to collectively process past identification and atrocities.
That raises a critical question. What happens when an entire national narrative collapses so utterly?
It creates a profound psychological void, often filled by strange, self-exculpatory ideas as people grapple with trauma and guilt, seeking alternative narratives to protect their self-perception.
Which brings us to a disturbing point, the widespread self-perception of Germans as victims afterward.
Indeed, a widespread self-perception of Germans as above all victims of the war emerged. Many felt largely blameless for Nazi horrors, often projecting blame, externally blaming American financial circles, a euphemism for Jews, falsely claiming they instigated wars and defeats.
Why this victim narrative?
It served a psychological purpose, allowing Germans to express suffering repressed under Nazi ideology, which stressed stoicism and forbade public grief. Allied interrogators observed blank stares or incomprehension from German officers when complaints about Allied bombing were met with reminders of German atrocities. A profound moral confusion, externalizing blame.
And there's a chilling disconnect in how generals viewed Hitler.
Yes. The sources show German generals viewed Hitler as crazy, not primarily for being genocidal, but because his decisions made them lose the war. He offended their professional ethic. The moral dimension seems secondary to military failure.
So for many leaders, military competence trumped moral implications. This narrow focus on doing the job, divorced from moral accountability, became a powerful mechanism for complicity.
Exactly. Allowing them to rationalize actions, avoid confronting the horrifying reality they helped create. It underscores how professional identity, unmoored from ethics, can contribute to immense injustice and a terrifying lack of accountability.
Okay, after all this horror, how is accountability finally sought? The Nuremberg trials are the most famous example.
Right. The victorious allies US, UK, France, USSR established the International Military Tribunal, IMT. From 45 to 46, they tried 24 high-ranking Nazi government officials and military leaders, Goering, Keitel, plus 7 organizations like the SS.
Charged with?
Crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity, conspiracy. Held in Nuremberg, symbolically chosen as a former Nazi rally center, making its use for justice powerful. The aim wasn't just justice, but crucially, to publicly document the crimes, symbolize the death of Nazi Germany.
When did it start?
Indictment, October 45. Trial started November 45. The world learned about the systematic planning, initiating, and waging of aggressive war. Graphic footage from liberated camps was undeniable evidence. Detailed the final solution, POW murders, extermination camp atrocities. October 46, 19 of 22 convicted, 12 sentenced to death. Nuremberg set crucial precedents for international law against war crimes, genocide. And beyond the main IMT, the U.S. held 12 more trials in Nuremberg, prosecuting 199 more defendants.
Who were they?
161 convictions, 37 death sentences. Targeting commanders, doctors, lawyers, judges, industrialists, bankers, those who willingly participated. The High Command trial specifically addressed Wehrmacht generals' culpability.
So Nuremberg wasn't just about individuals. It set a global standard, a legal framework for unimaginable crimes.
Fundamentally changed international law. But how do you hold an entire state apparatus, a vast military, accountable? That leads to the broader denazification process.
Happening alongside the trials.
Yes, across German-Austrian society, culture, press, economy, judiciary, politics. Goal: politically cleanse, prevent Nazis from holding important positions, rebuild democracy, active Nazis and functionaries, police, SS, civil servants removed from posts, subject to automatic arrest. Over 400,000 Germans detained initially.
How do they assess people?
A lengthy questionnaire, the Fragebogen, about Nazi activities memberships. Classification into 5 categories: major, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated.
But this process faced huge challenges.
Immense. Sheer numbers made thoroughness impossible. Disagreements among occupying powers led to inconsistencies. Then, the Cold War intensified. Western allies focused on rebuilding West Germany against the Soviets. Interest in deep denazification waned, increasing leniency, especially for small Nazis.
What's striking is that contrast. High-profile trials versus broader denazification, top leaders faced severe penalties.
With the rank and file, a much more lenient path to reintegration, often without full public reckoning. Overwhelming majority classified as followers, only 1.4%, as major offenders, often helped by exculpatory sworn statements from others.
So what happened to average Wehrmacht soldiers?
Varied, but trended towards reintegration. Many likely fell into followers or exonerated. Laws like West Germany's Law 131 and 51 allowed lesser offenders' followers back into civil service. East Germany, by 52, removed restrictions even more broadly. Result: extremely small number held truly accountable. By 1950, many offices staffed by the same people as before 45.
It tells us about the practical difficulties of societal cleansing and how geopolitics can overshadow justice. Political expediency impacting ethical responsibility. Okay, this next section is perhaps the most sensitive, most ethically delicate part of our deep dive. We need to approach it with extreme care and impartiality, as our sources stress. Drawing direct, causal, one-to-one connections between historical Nazism and contemporary political movements like Madre or other modern radical right populist movements requires incredibly careful academic analysis. We must avoid simplistic equivalences.
Absolutely. Nazism, as defined by the sources, was distinct. Far right, disdain for liberal democracy, totalitarian dictatorship, fervent anti-Semitism, anti-communism, scientific racism, white supremacy, homophobia, eugenics, ultranationalism from pan-Germanism, Volkisch movement. Its success stemmed from persuasive strategies, party unity displays, power projection, paramilitary violence, street rhetoric, pervasive propaganda.
Hitler's propaganda aimed at emotions.
Yes, made masses aware, convinced them only NSDAP could save Germany, used blunt, unadorned words, prioritizing effectiveness over intellectual ideology.
How does modern radical right populism compare?
Some scholars call it post-fascist or proto-fascist, a significant but distinct challenge to liberal democracy. Often constructs the people as one, leadership embodying this will, performs politics of the extraordinary, bypassing norms, crucially differs. Often promises to give power back to the people, not explicitly abolish elections, but frequently promulgates xenophobia, hatred based on race, religion, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation.
So the key isn't finding direct equivalence.
No, which again we must rigorously avoid. But identifying shared rhetorical strategies and psychological dynamics of radicalization that Nazism exploited and that we can observe echoing today. This allows critical analysis without oversimplification or alarmism.
Okay, let's look at some shared strategies. First, dehumanization and demonization. Nazis systematically dehumanized enemies, Jews as subhuman parasites, to disengage moral concern.
Contemporary extremist groups like neo-Nazis use violent rhetoric demonizing targets, while not always explicit, portraying immigrants, opponents, minorities as existential threats, vermin, invaders. In some populist rhetoric shares a functional similarity.
Creating us versus them, legitimizing hostility. The playbook of demonization, whether vermin then or invaders now, has a terrifyingly similar effect, making it easier to justify treating them as less than human.
Then, perceived injustice and in-group superiority. Radicalization often starts with perceived unfairness deprivation, activating in-group superiority, a strong predictor of violent attitudes. Nazis leveraged anger over WWII defeat, economic crises, presented Aryans as superior victims, Jews as the threat. Modern populism taps similar grievance sentiments, economic insecurity, cultural threat, fosters belief in national ethnic group supremacy or victimhood.
Which makes you ask, how susceptible are societies to these narratives of grievance and exceptionalism, especially during anxiety? A powerful, consistent path to radicalization.
Next, charismatic leadership and cult of personality. Nazis built a powerful cult around Hitler, Führerprinzip, infallible leader, embodiment of the nation.
Modern populism often shows similar emphasis on a singular, strong leader embodying people's will, the sole solution.
Yes, bypassing traditional processes, undermining institutions, encouraging unquestioning loyalty, demanding devotion over reasoned support. The allure of the strong leader is a recurring, potent theme, often eroding checks and balances.
And propaganda and information control. Nazis controlled the narrative, created a bubble, reinforcing beliefs via media education control.
Contemporary movements use sophisticated, often decentralized online platforms, Telegram for neo-Nazis, broader social media distributing propaganda, fostering echo chambers, manipulating emotions over logic. AI is even used for racist propaganda now. What's compelling is the adaptation of modern tech to recreate these echo chambers, making it easier than ever to prioritize emotion, just like the Nazis, but on a global scale.
Finally, anti-establishment and anti-pluralism. Nazism disdained liberal democracy. Modern right-wing populism often challenges liberal democracy's pillars, exhibits anti-pluralism, disregards minority protections.
Both engage in a delegitimization process against the political status quo, portraying established institutions, media, opponents as illegitimate, corrupt, dangerous.
A common thread: distrust of institutions, rejection of diverse viewpoints coexisting productively.
But while these parallels in strategies and dynamics are observable and vital to analyze, we must continually stress. Historical contexts and specific ideologies differ significantly. Nazism was totalitarian, explicitly sought to destroy democracy, employed systematic state-sponsored genocide. Modern populism typically operates within existing democratic frameworks, generally not advocating the same level of state violence or genocidal policy.
So the crucial distinction remains.
Absolutely. Which leads to the vital question. While rigorously avoiding simplistic equivalences, understanding these shared mechanisms, patterns of radicalization, dehumanization, leadership dynamics is vital for recognizing potential threats to democratic societies now. It's about critical awareness, not alarmism, giving you a framework.
Exactly. It's about learning from history, its uncomfortable lessons, to strengthen our resilience against ideologies threatening our values today. This deep dive isn't just about the past, it's about helping you be better informed, more discerning, more prepared for today's complex world. Hashtag, outro. So as you reflect on the incredible amount we've unpacked today about the Wehrmacht soldier, their daily lives, their complex, often contradictory mindset, their undeniable deep complicity in Nazi atrocities, and that multi-layered indoctrination from youth, it becomes clear their story is far more intricate, disturbing, and profoundly human than the simplistic, clean Wehrmacht myth ever allowed. We've seen how systematic social engineering clashes with messy human realities.
And we've seen the immense psychological impact of war, the hidden human cost of combat stress, the profound challenges of accountability and collective guilt post-defeat, and the lasting crucial lessons for understanding societal radicalization, especially through dehumanization, charismatic leadership, and information manipulation.
As you continue reflecting on the depth of what we've explored, the soldier's reality, internal struggles, profound complicity, consider this. How much does our understanding of ordinary people truly change when we meticulously examine the extraordinary, often horrific contexts they inhabit and the complex choices, or perceived lack thereof, they make within those extremes?
Which leads us to a crucial, enduring question for our time. In a world awash with information, narratives constantly competing for belief, how do we cultivate the critical thinking necessary to discern between legitimate grievance and manufactured outrage, especially when historical echoes and insidious rhetorical strategies are deliberately invoked? How do we apply lessons from such a dark chapter to protect democratic values and human empathy now?
We encourage you to continue your own deep dive, maybe seek out more primary sources, or critically analyze contemporary rhetoric through the discerning lens of these historical patterns. We truly hope this deep dive has helped you understand the profound complexities of this era and its enduring, vital lessons for today. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.